Today's video is all about how do you manage business processes in SharePoint and why is that as such a big issue. What I want to do today is just start with a bit of context. So many of us have processes and procedures written down and they're probably published on our intranets or published in our policy management solutions. But what we find is that people make assumptions, they skip parts of that process, and therefore things start to fail and there could be knock-on effects down the line. Great book, Checklist Manifesto, talks about this in length, about the value of checklists in organizations where people know exactly what they're doing, but for whatever reason, those tasks get skipped. So that's the backdrop to why we've put this video together. So who's this for and why? Really, we're targeting today people who are in managing operational roles, or maybe you're in compliance and you need to make sure that tasks get done. Or alternatively, maybe you're a bit of a SharePoint guru, you use SharePoint a lot, and you're looking for some ideas of how can I use SharePoint, to solve these kind of problems. So Ben, welcome to the video. You're the technical expert. Why not tell us what we're going to get out of today's session?
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thank you, Rupert. So, so key things we're going to be covering today are a review of some of the potential approaches to be able to do this within Microsoft 365, and in particular, how we can make these repeatable processes more standardized. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Planner and some of the challenges with using that tool to achieve this. And then we're going to focus on how we can use SharePoint and specifically Microsoft Lists to support this checklist solution and how that can tie into things like Power BI and Power Automate.
Okay, so I think it's worth just starting with examples of the kind of things we're going to talk about today to make sure we're all on the same page. So we're thinking about procedures. So the way that we work, we use something called EOS, or Entrepreneurial Operating System, and they talk about you have your core processes such as maybe sales, delivery, finance, and within there you will have procedures. Now, example procedures you might see is what happens at year end. A certain number of things need to happen by the finance department to close out your books, or a new customer joins your organization, what steps do you need to take to onboard them? The other piece where you see a lot of procedures is in HR. Everything in HR is pretty standardized, from hiring to appraisals, disciplinaries, offboarding. So a couple of examples there, and these department-specific examples which are often designed to support the rest of the business. On the other side, we also have industry-specific procedures, such as if you're in a manufacturing environment, and we've seen quite a lot of this in our client base, around order fulfillment. So what happens from that initial order to the order actually being delivered? And in the finance scenario, another one where we have a few clients in this space as well, when they're considering a deal, often it goes through a number of steps before that deal is decided to invest in, and that's something they're going to back. So we've got examples here of procedures, but I think, Ben, there's a couple we're going to pick out today, which maybe you could just take us through.
Yeah, absolutely. So the ones we're going to focus on today are the customer onboarding process. So this is or onboarding procedure, I should say. So this is very much within the sales process. It's something that is ad hoc. It is based on an event happening, i.e. a customer signing a deal. Multiple teams are going to be involved. So we'll have people from HR, we'll have project team, we'll have the sales team. And when these activities need to take place, there may be a number of different activities that had to happen in parallel at the same time. So it's not necessarily a case of holding off from sending one set of tasks before others are complete, for instance. The other process we're going to look at is a fairly common one, which is HR appraisals process. Again, this sits within our people process. It is a time-based activity, so it will happen, once a year or perhaps once a quarter, depending on your organization. And it's a set of tasks that is coordinated between a manager and the employee, and perhaps being prompted by a HR professional. In addition to that, there might be some secure documentation that needs to be kept and uploaded that's specifically only accessible by the manager and their employee.
Okay, so there's two use cases which most businesses will probably be impacted by. If we take a step back to make sure we use the right language through this, at the top level, we talked about we have this process, and the example I'm going to use in this case is sales. It covers the end-to-end procedures involved in a sales process. One of those procedures might be customer onboarding. There may be a procedure before that around contract negotiation and generation. There may be other procedures around that about setting up, for example, customer demonstrations. Within that procedure, we're then going to have a number of steps. So steps are effectively a grouping of tasks. So on customer onboarding, we might have a finance setup step, and within that finance setup step, we'll have a number of tasks, including one, for example, creating the customer account in your finance system. There may be other steps as part of that, or sorry, tasks as part of that. For example, doing a credit check. Now, once we've created this procedure, we then need to think about execution of the procedure. So within a procedure, you need a trigger to start it. And that trigger can either be time-based, so as Ben touched on earlier, we talked about the appraisal process happening maybe on an annual basis, but it also could be event-based. For example, a new joiner comes on, well, maybe you've agreed to make an offer to somebody and they've accepted it, that starts the new joiner process. At that point, we want to look at our master checklist and say, right, we need to create a copy of this and apply it just for that instance. So for example, if it's that new person, then we need to create those tasks which go against the new joiner process. And then we might consider who needs to do those tasks and if there's a due date on when they need to be delivered. Now, at which point we're into the execution phase. So we're now thinking about, okay, I'm the person who needs to do these tasks, so I need to be aware of these tasks. I may be required to provide some evidence that these tasks have done. For example, back to my employee onboarding process, I might show that I've got the references to say, yes, this person is who they say they are. And then finally, we've got this validation and reporting. So this is the compliance piece where somebody, either internally or maybe an external auditor, will come in and overview saying, have we followed the processes as described? Have we got the evidence to show it? So that reporting piece there as well. Now, Ben, if this is the theory, what tools have Microsoft offered us to help achieve some of these goals?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we can see here, we put a number of tools that we're going to run through that Microsoft provide for us. I think I'm going to start perhaps counterintuitively on the right-hand side here. So we'll look at Microsoft To Do initially. So this is very much a task that is targeted to the individual. It's about personal productivity within the organization. So your day-to-day tasks, maybe the things you're going to focus on today. It also connects quite nicely to Outlook. So if you mark something up or flag something up in Outlook, it will come through into your task list there. So in that regard, it's very much a sort of ad hoc, individualized set of tasks. Very easy to use, very intuitive, but not really appropriate for this use case. We then have Planner, which is often used for this type of use case. So Planner is effectively a set of tasks for a given team. It integrates natively into Microsoft Teams, so you can spin up a team, create a planner, create a plan within that. It's very collaborative. There's not an awful lot of governance around it though. So if you need to control who can have access to what, if you need to be able to filter out so that individuals can only see their tasks, for instance, it doesn't give you that capability. And as we'll see fairly shortly, it's a bit difficult if you want to repeat it and create standardized templates, for instance. I'm going to jump over to the other side then, take a look at Microsoft Project. So, you know, the thing about Microsoft Project, this is a very complex tool. It isn't part of the standard Microsoft 365 offering. It's an additional plan that you would need to take out. So typically what's going to happen here is there might be a number of individuals within the organization that have got project licenses, and they will be dedicated project managers carrying out specific, you know, tasks or managing programs or large scale projects within the organization. So yes, you can template it, but it's almost a bit of overkill really for the process that we're trying to do, and not everyone is going to have access to it. So we're going to settle on using Microsoft 365 lists, which sit within SharePoint. Yes, there's some configuration required. There's a bit of plumbing, if you will, to connect different lists together to do what they need to do. But it's got this really good balance of being quite easy for end users to be able to go and tick and you know, mark as complete the tasks that they need, but also being able to support things like more granular permissions and integrating natively with Power BI. So if you want to get some reporting and evidence around how you want to do this, you know, it's a good balance. So as you can see from this diagram, on the right hand side, side, it's probably more easy to use. On the left-hand side is more governance, but I think, you know, Microsoft 365 List is that good balance, almost like the Goldilocks, if you will, of the tools to use for this scenario.
So Ben, I think just before we dive into that, I think we will open Planner. So we flip over to a demo environment, we can bring Planner up. And on the Planner tab here, I've got a couple of examples which I set up earlier just to see what that would look like. So we talked about employee onboarding, and actually within Planner, you see on the bottom left there, Ben, if you click on New Plan, what I noticed was actually Microsoft have got their own templates there, and one of those is employee onboarding. So we actually set that up, and if you click on Next, and Next, it will create that, but we actually created one earlier.
Can't seem
So
to
let's
get rid
just
of this.
close that.
Yeah, we'll have a look at one we've done earlier. Can't seem to get rid of that. There we go. It's gone now.
Okay, so what I did is I went into Planner and I set one up earlier. So if you click on the plan saying employee onboarding Bob, what this does is create a plan for each person you're going to onboard. And it has a number of buckets, as you can see: post offer acceptance, technology, paperwork, etc. And what you can then do is take these tasks, and if you click on a task, you could type a name in and assign it to somebody, and that person will get an email saying, "This is your task." There we go, and that will come through to their inbox. So that does look great, but if you imagine that you've got 20 people joining, maybe you've got a large cohort joining, you're suddenly going to have to create 20 plans to do this, and this is going to become a bit of an overhead. The other thing which I'm noticing this is security perspective or compliance. There's nothing to stop someone deleting a task, so there's no granular such as say contribute rights that you might get in SharePoint, where you can go and create content, but you can't change the underlying structure. You don't have that with Planner. I did look at another approach just to prove that it's not the right answer, really. So if you click on the team approach, thinking, well, what happens if you had one plan for all new joiners? And then you end up in this scenario where you have a new joiner, and then you have this huge checklist of all the things which need to happen for that person. And then you've got to work out, well, who's going to do these, because you can't assign these at an individual level. So you've got that problem, and also you haven't got the ability to roll up report on the checklist items, so what's done and what's not done. So really, I don't think that's the answer either. So certainly a few gaps in Planner. I mean, I know it's easy to cut and paste a task, and so I could create another joiner just by cutting and pasting one of these tasks. We can template plans. It's not the greatest experience, but it can be done. So it's quite a few gaps within Planner. I don't know, Ben, anything you want to add on that?
Yes, and I mean, I think it's as Rupert says, the hardest thing around this is it's difficult to report, it's difficult to template, and when you go and spin up all of these new plans, that actually has additional overhead. Every plan has a Microsoft 365 group. It's with an associated SharePoint site. It's creating quite a lot of unnecessary additional assets within your space that aren't really needed. So yeah, I mean, effectively it's good for maybe a really small business that maybe doesn't bring on that many people or a much lower time scale. But if you're in a larger organization and you're recruiting people fairly frequently, this probably isn't the tool of choice.
Okay, so if we come back to the slides here, what I can show is like the 4 attributes I think that we thought were key for when we're thinking about task or checklist management. So the first thing is it needs to be repeatable. So once I've got my gold standard of what it looks like, I need to be able to create new instances of that. Which leads nicely onto scalable, which is if I've got multiple instances, then I need to be easy to manage, and really, but what Ben was touching on there was with Planner, that just doesn't happen. Even with the new portfolio feature, it is a premium license. That's still not going to solve that problem for you. The other bit that we touched on is granular permissions. So SharePoint's famous for its permissions, and also sometimes it's possible to go too far in SharePoint permissions, but it does give you the control. So for example, we want to be able to create tasks and people not to be able to delete them, but maybe just to update them. And then the accountable piece, we need to make it easy to report. Whether I'm someone who's receiving tasks, I want to get a view of everything assigned to me, or if I'm in that compliance role or that manager role, and I want to see, well, look, what's my team got on their plate? Where are we stuck? Where are the bottlenecks? And ideally, I want to be able to see what's coming down the line. So it might be, well, look, we've onboarded a client, so in the project management office, I need to be aware in 10 days' time I'm going to have to do maybe a kickoff with them, or set them up as a client. So if that's what good looks like, I set Ben the challenge of saying, well, Ben, can we build something to achieve this? And I think you pulled something together.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rupert. Let's switch back to the demo environment and take a look. So I think before we go into any of the sort of technical implementation here, I think it's just worth highlighting how we actually promote and display our procedures within our intranet. So the starting point is that we've actually documented these procedures in the intranet. We're going to look at the sales procedure here. So we have processes. I keep getting my terminology wrong. So we have the sales process, and within that we have a number of different procedures that we follow. So we can see that these are the various different procedures that need to be followed as part of that overarching sales process. And one of the things we're going to be looking at today is customer onboarding. So if we go and take a look at the customer onboarding procedure, we can see that we've documented this. We can see the steps that are carried out by sales. We can see the steps carried out by the finance team. And then there's a set of steps that need to be done by the project team in our particular case. But I think, as we said before with the checklist manifesto, it's great to have all of this stuff documented, but how do we actually ensure that this is going to be followed in a standardized way? So this is our reference, and we're going to have a look at how we've been able to put something together around that. So I'm going to jump to our customer hub a minute, and we can see we've just got a couple of example demo customers here. We're using something called document sets within SharePoint to manage all of the important commercial documents for our customers. And we can even do things such as manage the status or the stage or procedure that is running against that particular customer. So you can see I have some customers in here already, and I've got a set of tasks that are currently running or outstanding as part of that process. So if I just go and have a look, I can see the current procedure that's running is the onboarding procedure, and I can see within that there are a set of tasks, and I can even see things like such as what their due date is, are they overdue, what the status is, and I've got these visual prompts that you get within SharePoint natively. And of course, because this is SharePoint, you can tie it into things such as reminders and notifications when status changes, etc., etc. We're able to do things such as connect it to a document repository. So if we need to go and upload some files that are used as evidence as part of that process, we can do that quite easily. So the question is, how have we been able to generate this standard set of tasks, and how do we make this repeatable? So the way that we do that is we have created a separate list here, which is our template list. So our customer procedure template list. And what I'm going to do just very quickly is flip that over so I can see some of the different procedures within here. If I look at the onboarding procedure, I can see that broken down by those steps that we saw on the intranet. So I can see these are the tasks, the step that they follow. I can see whether or not they're required. So not all tasks maybe need to be required. Maybe some of them are optional, and I can even pre-assign them within the template to the users that are going to need to be responsible for carrying them out. So again, if I expand out some of those, I'll see those additional tasks here, and then finally the projects tasks. Now, something to, again, just draw your attention to, the thing with a template, it's not necessarily possible to set specific due dates on tasks in a template, but what we use instead is this idea of an offset. So given that this is a procedure that is triggered based on an event, such as a contract being signed, the offset will calculate 10 days moving forward from the point of that date, and it will sign these tasks based on that due date offset. So it means based on something happening, here is a set of tasks that needs to be carried out, perhaps within 2 days, within 5 days, within 10 days, etc. Okay. So I've got my template. I've got some tasks. Let's go and kick off a process. for one of those customers. So I'm going to take this one, which hasn't been started yet. So let's say, for instance, we're about to go and start this, bring on board this customer. I'm just going to be, for my housekeeping, I'm going to go and set that prospect to customer now. So just doing that. And now I'm going to kick off a Power Automate that we've created, which is effectively the glue that brings the template and turns it into a set of tasks. So let's give that a second to load up. So I can see within my Power Automate, I can choose the procedure that I want to run. I'm going to run the onboarding procedure. Purely really for the purpose of the demo, I've allowed us to actually say when the contract sign date was, so we could set up some things in the past, but I'm just going to kick this off from today, and I'm just going to go and run that. So that will take typically maybe 10 seconds or so. It shouldn't take too long to generate that. So let's just go and have a quick look, see if that's refreshed already. No, normally it's a bit quicker than that, but let's give it one more go. There we go. So we didn't have to wait too long for that. So I can now see that that is completed. It's now in the onboarding state. And if I have a look at these tasks, I can see they have been pulled from my task template and they've been assigned due dates. So we are currently on the 23rd of January, and I can see that those due dates have been assigned based on that offset. Again, 2 days, 5 days, etc., etc. And it's created spaces for me where I can upload my documents. Now, one of the really nice things about tasks and lists in SharePoint is that we've got quite some flexibility about how we interact with it. One of the things people like about Planner is the board view and the ability to move tasks and drag and drop them quite natively. But this is something that's actually available within SharePoint lists as well. So I can create a view using the board layout, and I've called it Kanban view in this particular case, if you're familiar with that term. And you can now see I've got this view of different tasks organized by their status. And I'll be able to use this to drag and drop tasks from one status to another and to move them through the process. If I want to just filter out those tasks by the customer, I can do that quite nicely. So I'll just click on the filter button there, give that a second. I'm going to go and choose InGen, which is the one we just set up. And I'll just move that view down. Again, what I probably should do, to be honest, is filter by the tasks that are assigned to me. So I'll do that as well. And again, I can see these are the current tasks that are assigned to me. So I'm going to move these through to started. I've done this one. And I've done that one.
If I was that person in IT who had to create all these user accounts, I could filter by all the new employees where I've been assigned a task to create an account. Ignore the details which say go and issue a laptop and all the things issued to other people to do, and just focus on that one task and tick them all off.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, within SharePoint, you have these different views that can automatically filter by the current user. If I switch over to this view here, then again, I've got a view of all of the tasks that have been pre-filtered to me that I can go through and do the activities that I need to do. I think something I am just going to address here is that, so we haven't actually implemented any granular permissions within this, but this is perfectly achievable within SharePoint. So if you needed to do so, it would be possible to go and apply permissions that restrict users from being able to edit other people's tasks. That's something that's just quite standard within SharePoint, being able to do that. So again, you've got much more control over who can see what, who's able to edit what, and it's much more manageable. So I've kicked off my process. I've seen my tasks. I've moved them through the process based on using that Kanban view. And I've shown you how you can use that sort of template concept to organize this. The final thing that we might want to consider, though, in a scenario like this is we're actually going to want to see a bit of reporting on this. Okay. Now, it is worth noting, by the way, that within SharePoint lists, so this is another really nice feature of SharePoint lists. Within SharePoint's list, it is possible to natively generate a new report from Power BI directly, and you can just go and visualize this list. Now, as it happens, there are some limitations with this approach. So I've actually chosen to build a report from scratch, and I've actually got that open here. I've made it look quite similar to the report that you get, but I wanted to do a little bit more customization to it, so it made sense to build my own report and do it that way. But effectively, what I have here is a Power BI report that is pulling from that task data and allows me to see and filter based on the tasks assigned to a given customer. I could assign, at the moment we've just got tasks in the onboarding process, but I do have tasks at different steps. So I want to go and see how many tasks the projects team have got to do, how many tasks are assigned to owners. I can filter by started, and I can look at things like due dates and see how that comes through. Again, I haven't put it into this particular Power BI report, but what you would typically do is implement some form of drill through within this, so you can then select those tasks and then filter and then see that kind of more detailed view within your Power BI report. So this gives you this overview, and again, you could bring into things like such as tasks that are overdue, analytics such as typical time to complete tasks and who are the people that tend to take the longest, etc. So you can see the capability that this has by nature of being natively integrated within Microsoft Lists and Power BI. So maybe let's just summarize and switch back to the PowerPoint.
Yeah, so what I thought I would do, that was really interesting, Ben, and really brought it to life, is just go through what I understand you've done there. And so hopefully other people understand it too, and do feel free to chip in if I've got any of this wrong. So you started by creating, or you have a list where you have your templated procedures, and that's going to be comprised of steps and tasks. You also had a bit of extra information there about the offset. So if this task happens, on day one, then this might happen on week 2 and week 3, and you can set that up in advance. And we talked about, look, it's likely that the same people or groups of people might be doing these tasks. So therefore, let's put a default owner in. And then we can always change that down the line, but it gives us the ability. And then you talked about the flexibility that some tasks may not be required. For example, if we're doing work with a US client, we wouldn't expect them to set up a direct debit in the UK. Now, there'll be some kind of trigger. And when that happens, we're going to create a copy of that task list there. And that gives us the ability to refine who actually gets those tasks. We might want to overwrite the defaults. And also opportunity to update due dates if that's what's necessary as well. And as you can see there, we've got the Power Automate logo down here. So that was an automated workflow process, and we're still using Microsoft Lists, just a different list. Now, at which point somebody or people can then go through and complete these tasks. And as you can see the icon, they've changed from boxes to check boxes if they've completed it. So they can change the status. They may add some evidence. I think we're going to touch on that in a minute. And then we may at the end have some follow-on process or action when all these tasks are completed. And then the last piece you showed us, which was pretty cool, was the reporting, so the status. So that was using Power BI. You created a chart there, which looked pretty cool, particularly if you're trying to find out where things are going wrong, where the bottlenecks are, if certain things are always running overdue. Obviously, we're going to have that data recorded because we're going to have the date when things were due, the date when things were actually completed. We can start pulling out some quite interesting data. So I think they've got that right. Is that what we've done there, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely, Rupert. You summarised it well.
Okay, good stuff. So let's do one more example. And this time, I think we're going to go to HR.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm just going to navigate to this from our intranet homepage here. So again, we've just published on our intranet homepage a summary of the people procedure. So let's just take a very quick look at that first of all. So similarly, we've broken down what the steps are, and in this case, we've highlighted whether it's a manager or an employee that needs to carry out those particular steps. So we can see the first step, manager feedback, self-assessment, etc., through to the next stage, and then with following up with outcomes. So again, let's just take a look at how we've approached that within the HR system. I'm not going to do an end-to-end demo in quite the same way, but just to highlight how the concept is similar. So I think the first thing just very quickly to highlight is that each of the different workspaces will have their own space and their own set of process templates that can be managed with them. We need to consider how we factor that in when you've got processes that span across multiple departments, of course. That's something to factor in, but we're looking within the process template for HR. So again, we've got multiple procedures here. We start with a few examples, and the one that we're going to take a look at is this annual appraisal. If we expand that out, we can see that we've represented those same set of tasks as we did previously. We can see they're part of this annual appraisal procedure. We can see the steps that we talked about. And in this case, instead of using a default assigned to field as an individual, that's not going to be appropriate because that's going to be different in every case. So we're actually using an additional choice column here within SharePoint, and we've marked it up as a manager or an employee. So when we have our Power Automate that goes and takes a copy of this, it's going to go and figure out who the manager should be, who the employee should be, and then use this to drive getting the task assigned to the correct person. So let's take a look at one of those that is running. If I click on the employee records area, I can see if we have a look at Rupert, he is currently under the annual appraisal procedure as it currently stands. There's 9 tasks outstanding assigned to him. And what we've done is, again, because we're using document sets, we can actually bring in some metadata onto the document set that defines, obviously, the employee himself as a people field, and then the manager that is assigned to that as well. So that will be used to drive who those tasks are going to get assigned to. So if we take a look at those individual tasks, we can then see for each of those tasks, when the Power Automate flow has run, it's looked at that that choice field value and said, okay, yeah, in this case, substitute employee with Rupert, substitute manager with Ben. But again, we have our due dates and all these other things that we can do in our filtering, etc., etc. Now, again, finally, as we said before, there may be certain documents, particularly in appraisal process, you'll actually want to manage and store some of those appraisal documents within here. So we created a folder that is linked to the employee record and assigned to those tasks where we can upload and store some of those documents. We haven't done it in this demo, but what we would definitely do in a real scenario is to go and lock that down and assign the permissions between the employee and the manager so that they're able to access these individual documents, but without being able to see any other data in anyone else's employee records folder. So yeah, should we switch back?
Yeah, let's do that. So that brings to the end of the demo side of it. I think it's just probably worth highlighting. If you're thinking about maybe this is something I need to do, I do start with, say, review your processes. You don't need to go into massive depth because what Ben showed us there is it is very flexible. If a task change, you can change the tasks. But often we get into SharePoint workshops and people spend quite a lot of time in working out what they do internally when you've got 2 people who both are following the process in a slightly different way. So have a look at that. Second thing is, what do you need from a compliance perspective? What kind of reporting, what kind of evidence do you need to make sure that's going to be captured as part of a process? And then as we talked about, at the top of this webinar, is like there's quite a few tools out there, certainly within the Microsoft stack and also outside the Microsoft stack. So think about what is the right tool of what you need. So it's that balance of ease of use, but also compliance. And that's why, we settled on Microsoft List. So I hope you found today interesting. I think, it's another great use case of how SharePoint can solve, some of those business challenges. If you'd like to have a conversation with me about SharePoint, checklists, or anything else that we do, policy management, just jump on our website, click book a discovery call, and that will pop something in my diary. But otherwise, that's a wrap from us. Ben, thanks again for putting this together. Pretty awesome. And look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thanks very much.